Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 191. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, we have a very, very special guest, Jimmy Christie. Jimmy, how are you?
Joe, I am fantastic and so happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you here. And before we get started, I wanted to just explain the connection that we have, because the person that connected us is a previous podcast guest, Kate Moser, and she is also one of, I think, just the best people that I know. And so before we really dive into you and your story, how do you know Kate?
Oh man, it's so funny. I think Kate and I, along with Anjali Signeri, we've become very, very close over the past few months. I met Kate through Anjali, through the Lululemon community. I host a run club out of Phoenixville, and we got connected because Lululemon is so connected in the community, right? And Anjali and Kate, actually, we all had a nice run club community get together. And now I know Kate's race schedule and Anjali's race schedule. We're signing up for things. We're pushing each other to be great, man. And she's a wonderful person.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned her as well. So Anjali was episode 116 of this podcast. Kate was episode 158. And here we are, episode 191. And so with that being said, Jimmy, for people listening who don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself?
Thank you for the question, Joe. Big Simon Sinek fan. Start with the why. I always like to say, if you ask me who I am, I'm Jimmy Christie, and I'm on a mission to inspire others to be the best version of themselves. I personally do that largely through running and the running community. I feel like I'm someone who goes all in on things. I know a lot of my friends and people would say something similar. So in that vein, for running, I'm a coach. I'm a pacer. If you've ever seen anyone who holds the signs up at the races, sometimes that's me. I lead a run club. I've run 48 marathons, finished an ultra 100-mile race, created a global running day event for over 100 runners that we were free to celebrate what we are capable of, and just trying to do my best to inspire the running community.
So I've got to ask you this, and maybe before I say this, let me rewind and say I also am a big Simon Sinek fan, and I love that your introduction was not necessarily about, this is what I do for work or this is my title. I love that you went deep and you went with the mission. So my question though is for the pacing, right? So, marathon pacers always intrigue me because you really have to be on, right? There are people who are depending on you to be accurate, to go the distance, to run the pace you say you're going to run. How challenging or not challenging is that to actually do over and over and over again?
Very fortunately, at this point, I feel pretty strong about the ability to do it. After running for the past 7 years, real hard, all in, 2,000 miles a year type of thing. So I will never pace something that I'm not able to do at a pace I'm comfortable with, if that makes sense. You're always supposed to pace at least like 30 seconds to a minute slower than your goal race time. So over time, I'm dialed in on my heart rate and everything like that. So at this point, I feel really comfortable. If you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, it's very, very challenging.
Mm. Are there any memories that stand out to you from all of the races that you've paced? Just any particular people who, really had to work hard to hang on, or you had great conversations with, or had memorable experiences with?
I love that question. Thank you. My first one sticks out. Paced the Harrisburg half marathon at like an 8:35 pace, so that was a lot of fun. Never forget the first one, and just the comment of "you helped me achieve my goal." That's why I do it, and that's why I want to continue to do it. I paced the Rehoboth Beach. It's the Coastal Delaware Running Festival at I think it was a 3:25 pace, and that was the Boston qualifying time for women. And I had a woman come up to me afterwards and said, like, you helped me get the BQ. So that makes it so worth it for me.
Wow. So last question on this before we move on. Do your arms get tired?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes I try to offer the stick up and say, hey, this actually gives you power and strength, but really I'm just like, I need a break.
I love that. So,
But
all right. So, with that being said, Jimmy, before we dive into the deep, deep stuff, I would love to
yeah.
hear, how did you get into running in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Joe. So always loved being active. Really like to see what I'm capable of doing. I think like you, like many of us that like to push our limits to see, hey, what can I do, right? And running something I've always been like decent at in terms of like fast by standards of whoever wants to set them, right? And 7, 8 years ago, I read a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I do know I do know his mantras, and he is wants some to push his limits, right? So, listen to his audiobook while training for my first half marathon, and that's kind of what took it off and skyrocket, and kind of being able to pair, hey, I'm not just like good at running, good meaning fast. Like I don't really care about that anymore, to be honest, but I know what I'm able to do to help others, to help them achieve their goals with Run Club, with everything. So that started it, but then I gained confidence to be like, hey, I can do so much more than like just for myself with running.
Yeah. It's interesting that David Goggins was part of that story and that there was a spark in there somewhere. And there are mixed opinions out there on the internet or in the world. But I think one of the things he does really well is he doesn't waver in his stance on things. And he obviously walks the walk, right? He does what he talks about. And there's a quote from that book, Can't Hurt Me, where he says, "You are in danger of living a life so comfortable and soft that you will die without ever realizing your true potential." And the motto of Project Endure is do hard things for that reason, right? Like our potential lives on the other side of hard. What we're capable of exists on the other side of the things that are uncomfortable. And I think in a lot of ways, running is so beautiful because it allows people to access that. It allows people to do the hard things. And then when it gets hard, continue, make the choice to put one foot in front of the other. And in that way, I think running is so powerful. And I'm sure we'll get more into this, but I am a David Goggins fan, so I'm glad that you brought him up.
We'll take your response to the question and we'll just use that one because that was very well said.
No, please. I just regurgitated what you said in a different way. But so we'll go into the first big question of the podcast, Jimmy. And I ask this to everybody, but when you look back at your life to this point, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
It's a tough question. It is. And I think very fortunately, I guess me personally and my physical and mental capabilities, from the grand scheme of things, fortunately haven't had to endure some of the stuff that maybe someone else has unintentionally. But so I'll share my story and maybe we'll see where this goes. But about 15 years ago, my dad, he ran his own machine shop, took so much pride in being active, providing for our family. He underwent a double knee replacement and supposed to, get him back, get ready. It failed, unfortunately. It was in the 1%. That just didn't work out. So his mobility declined, and his passion did, right? Not long after that, my mom went through her own health challenges, 2 hip replacements, and a slew of other things that we don't have to get into. So not looking good for my future, but fingers crossed. But just watching both of them, people who gave so much of themselves, not being able to do what they used to do and want to do it, it's hard, right? I know we all go through that, but seeing that happen to both of my parents in such a short period of time is probably one of the hardest things that I've endured and am currently enduring. I come from a very Italian family, Joe. I feel like we might bond over that. But you come over, you're not leaving without a meal to go container type of thing. And hey, that still happens, but just not being able to see my parents be able to do that to their ability is challenging. So I guess maybe in summary, I learned that if you don't have your health physically or mentally as important, it's harder to give. So that's what hit me the hardest, honestly. For their challenges, they didn't choose a lot of that. But it shaped me to prioritize my health. It might sound crazy, it might sound selfish, but if I don't prioritize my physical and mental health, then I can't be the best to give to other people. So I can take care of myself best to serve other people. So
So
yeah.
there are a couple things that I would love to talk about there, and one brings me back to the last podcast episode, episode 190 with Callum Cobb. He lost his mom to cancer and watched his dad battle cancer as well. And talking with him and realizing that one, none of us are immune to the hard things that happen in life, and you could be here one day and gone the next, and that can seem like a dark, scary thought. It is the truth. And on the flip side, it's also all the more reason to live to the fullest of our potential today and to be present and to embrace the things that we get to do. So that's one thought that comes up, right? To be able to watch other people go through hard things and then let that inform a sense of gratitude for ourselves that we are capable and we have our abilities and not take that for granted is one. And then two, I think like the selfishness is an interesting concept because for most of my life, I would imagine most of your life and most of the lives of people listening, the word selfish has a little bit of a negative connotation, because it implies that you're taking something away from other people so that you can have it. But at the end of the day, I think being selfish can be a good thing. One of my favorite phrases is in order to be sustainably selfless, you need to be selectively selfish. And it means, right, exactly what you said. Sometimes we have to do the things for ourselves so we can fill up our own cup and then we can go pour into other people's. And so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on either or both of those things. On the first side was, being grateful for what we are able to do. And then on the second side, not being afraid to do what we need to do in terms of being a little bit selfish from time to time.
I love both of those and very, very well said, Joe. I have officiated three weddings, and in each of the three, I usually end with that. I hope that a couple practices gratitude.
Mm.
And my favorite quote, uh, which I know you love quotes too, is gratitude is your haves, what you have, divided by your wants. So the more that you have and you're grateful for what you have, the less more that you need out of the world. So gratitude is something that is wholeheartedly something I try to practice every single day, and could not agree more with what you said. So thank you for sharing that. And I think I'm going to start using the word selectively selfish. Absolutely. I think it's absolutely appropriate and correct that we should be able to do that to provide and, like you said, fill up others' cups. So I will be stealing that, not so shamelessly. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Now, it brings to mind a story that I heard over the past couple of weeks about a minister and a monk. And I'll share it here. I probably won't do it justice, but I'll tell it as best as I can. Are you familiar with this by any chance?
No.
Okay, great. So how it goes is imagine we're 1,000 years back in time, and these two young boys grow up in a village. They're friends, and as they get older, they kind of go their separate ways. And one of them becomes a minister to a very rich and powerful king, and the other one becomes a monk. And one day, decades later, they cross paths again by chance and they catch up and they're talking about their lives. And, the minister is wearing a fancy clothing and, he's got on nice shoes and, he's talking about how, he has to do a lot, right? He's at the will of the king, whatever the king wants, he needs to do because he's serving the king, but he gets paid well, he gets fed well, he wears nice clothes. The monk, on the other hand, is wearing kind of like, you know, not the best clothing. It's a little bit dirty. It's got some rips in it. He's got sandals on. He's talking about how he meditates all day and he eats rice and beans every day. And they're going on and on. And by the end of the conversation, the minister starts to feel bad for his friend, the monk. And before they separate, the minister says to the monk, have you ever thought of maybe doing something different? You could find a king and minister to the king. That way you don't have to eat rice and beans. And the monk kind of smiles and nods and says, "Yeah, I've thought about that, but have you ever thought about learning to live off of rice and beans so that you don't have to minister to the king?" And that story really speaks to me because I think most of us in America lean toward the minister. I'll do more, I'll work harder, I'll have more so that I could meet all of these wants. But the monk, I think, has it right. The monk has very little in terms of need. And because he needs so little, he has everything that he needs. And in a lot of ways, that is wealth, right? And I think that is what we want, to have our needs and wants met. And so I just thought that story kind of made sense in terms of what we were talking about. I'd be curious to hear if you have any thoughts on that.
That is probably the hardest balance to balance your haves, what you have and what you want. Literally, like my mantra is capable of more. I wear it all the time, but it's also, three words kind of stick, but the other three would be, acceptance, gratitude, self-reflection. There's such a need to be in the center of that. If you are always constantly wanting more, or the minister to the king, you're not focusing on what you have.
Mm.
And that is so hard. And I mean, in our world, just taking it back to, doing hard things, which can be anything, right? In your job as a parent, physically, you always are probably looking to the next thing. And so many of us don't take the time to self-reflect as much. Even a lot of us do goals that are yearly. I've started to do it quarterly now, breaking it down by my role, season, and life. And I think it's really helps me stay present. But so that's where that your comment took me. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Now, speaking of goals, I think this is something interesting for us to discuss because it relates to running and it also relates to life. So when it comes to setting goals, I'll use running as an example for this concept, but goals help guide a process. If you say you want to run a 5K, the training is going to look a lot different than if you say you want to run a marathon because the goal is different, the process will be different. You won't be running as much volume to train for a 5K in theory, right? The paces might be different, so on and so forth. The timeline might be different even. So the goal guides the process. I think in life, a lot of times we set goals and we get attached to the outcome and we don't let the goal inform the process as much as it should. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you want to set a goal of, writing a book. Okay. So you want to write a book this year. That's the goal. That should guide the process. So what's the process? Well, you probably need to write, if not every day, most days. And so the process is what's important. What I think happens sometimes for me is I set a goal, I start the process, I lose sight of the goal, and therefore I lose sight of the process. And what I've been trying to do more often recently is instead of setting the goal, what do I want to have? I think about who do I want to be? And who I want to be becomes the goal. How do I want to show up every day? And that becomes the new process. And instead of focusing on the goal, just focusing on the process. I don't know if that made any sense to anyone listening, but I'd be curious how you see goals, how you see the process, if those things go hand in hand for you or what you think.
I love it. It's who you want to be guides the process, and the way that I've probably been doing it in my life is, or at least for the past 7 years, is talking about a vision. So who you want to be, Joe, you probably have a mission or a vision statement, and I think for so many people that may be listening and it's so challenging. I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I want to do. I think it's totally okay to set that for the next 6 months and 12 months and then go towards that because you need a North Star, or else, like you
Mm.
said, you're going to set a goal, you're going to make a process for that. It's going to get hard and you're either going to do it and be happy and then move on and be like, now what? But if you have that guiding principle, and I think what's so hard for people is like, oh, I don't know, like it's a solidified thing that can change. You're who you want to be can change and it should change. And if it doesn't change, that's probably an issue,
Yeah.
right? Like as you've grown with Project Endure and everything, maybe you're who you want to be. Like maybe there's some parts of it that stay, but now that you have access, you've known, you've failed, you've grown, you've done so much. Who you want to be might be way bigger than you ever thought. And that's okay. And that's a good thing.
Mm. I couldn't agree more. That was so well said. And I think just to highlight something that's hard when it comes to applying what you just said is that this might sound dramatic, but change involves letting parts of us die, right? Like change and pivot means letting part of what we thought we wanted or part of who we thought we were die off and leave that behind us, right? That is hard, that is uncomfortable. Change is one of the hardest things in the world, but change is required to continuously grow and adapt and evolve into the person that we want to become. And you're absolutely right. Who we want to be not only can change as time goes on, but it should change as time goes on. As we change and we're exposed to new things and thoughts and ideas and we come across new challenges, we have to be able to be rigid in some things in the core of who we are. We need to be able to hold that together no matter what we care about most, how we see the world, our values, etc. But all of the other things can and probably should shift and adapt and adjust. And you just said it so well. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll go now to the second big question that I ask all the guests. So instead of what's the hardest thing that you didn't choose, when you look at your life to this point, what is the hardest thing that you've done on purpose and why did you do that thing?
This is probably the one I'm most excited for because it's really helped shape who I am and how I carry myself at this point. So, many people that know me know I'm a big runner. The hardest thing that I've done on purpose was attempt to qualify for the Boston Marathon.
Mm,
Everyone kind of deems the Boston Marathon as the Super Bowl of running, and I'll get into a little bit for those that aren't like super familiar, but not just because it's physically demanding, but the emotional roller coaster that it takes and the mental endurance that I learned. So I learned a kind of a mindset strategy that I use daily that I'm super excited to talk about. But my story on it is 4 years ago, set my sights on a sub 3 hour marathon, which is a 6:52 pace, and I'm nowhere close to that. I know people that may know me now, like, no, you've always been fast. Promise you, that's not the case. In my first attempt of this, Joe, I ran a 3:57, which is 57 minutes slower than my time. Now, I know there might be some people listening like 3:57 is an awesome time. Look, thank you. First of all, thank you. I appreciate that. It is. I'm super happy. Completing a marathon is a hard thing. I promise you that you would be upset if you were 57 minutes slower than your goal time. So, for what it's worth, that kind of had me questioning. That's probably one of the biggest failures that I had. Like, what did I do wrong? What was my training? Well, you learn a lot, right? So started training, asked a bunch of people, asked some of the people in my corner, basically was able to get in 2023, I broke the 3 hour mark with a 2:57. Super proud of myself. But for those of you who don't know about the Boston Marathon, they have the ability to lower the standard after you qualify. So I had to wait 5 months to learn that my 2:57 does not get me into the Boston Marathon.
uh,
And that was crushing. I've never had that happen to me before. Again, I lived a very fortunate life, but like that just absolutely crushed me. So that being said, that was like another setback. Can I make it? Of course, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to try. So I trained harder, and 2024, I ran a 2:51:53 at the Myrtle Beach Marathon, and I got in for the 2025. So the Myrtle Beach Marathon, I ran a 2:51:53. My I thought there was no chance I could ever beat 2:53. And I know like for if you don't run, it's like a minute. A minute's a lot. I promise you. A minute's a lot. But it taught me a mental strategy that I live by, and it's called confidence without expectations. The best way I can explain that is showing up fully confident in your ability to succeed in whatever you want to do, knowing you've put in the work, but detaching from the pressure of a specific outcome
mm,
and accepting the range of outcomes. Whether you're when we tie our self-worth to one result and we're not confident that we get there, I think we limit what's possible. But when you get to whatever your starting line is, not a rate, like it could be a job, could be whatever that is, and you're confident that you can be the best you can be, and you accept a range. On my best day, I'm here. On my worst day, I'm lower. It frees you to go and do what you want to do and love it. I live by this daily, Joe. At work, at home, at my next race. And this year I ran the Boston Marathon, 2:50:55, finished in the top 10%. So it's taught me so much. And I'm super, super proud of it.
Well, first of all, congratulations. As someone who does run, I can affirm that that is impressive to shave off not only 57 minute or an hour from 3:57 to 2:57, but I would almost imagine it was much harder to go from 2:57 down to, what did you say that was? A 2:50?
52-ish.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Those 7 minutes are well deserved, hard earned. Um, and so I don't know. It makes me think of there's this quote by Alan Watts that I really love, and so I'll read it. He says, "To have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water because if you do, you will sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float." And I think it's counterintuitive, right, on the surface. Like, if you want a goal, you should try harder. You should grab onto it. You should just, like, be relentless. And yes, and you also have to have an element of surrender because you are not the outcome. Like you said, your worth is not tied to the outcome. It's about embracing the process. It's about showing up and controlling what you can, which is really at the end of the day, just our effort and our attitude. And if you go in giving your best to those two categories, then you can be proud of that and you should be proud of that. And the outcome, I believe, will show up over time as long as you continue to control those two things, learn from mistakes, be relentless in pursuit of it. But it's all about attitude and effort. And if you can control those things, then you're doing what you need to be doing.
Attitude and effort. That's it. You took my whole answer and put it into 2 words. I love it. It's attitude and effort.
Well,
It's amazing.
what's interesting is, like, you could almost umbrella that underneath one thing, which would just be choices, right? We get to choose our attitude and our effort, but really those are the only two things we can control. And for example, right, and this is very tangible, very easy to understand, you could put in all the work to a marathon. Let's just say for someone listening, your goal is 4 hours. You could put in all the training, all the work, all the metrics you're hitting along the way are saying, yes, you should be sub 4. And then you get to the race day, your nutrition's on point. You start off, everything's going great. You have no idea, like, a storm could come and, the conditions change and that's outside of your control. Or someone could fall in front of you. You might trip and fall, scrape your leg, and now all of a sudden you're banged up. There's so many things that can happen that are not within our immediate control, that you have to be willing to just control those two things. How am I going to respond with my attitude? And what am I going to give with my effort? And if we can do that, I think life becomes pretty simple.
To that point, Joe, even just taking the very specific of a storm could happen in a marathon. Something can happen at work that you don't control or whatever that is. I was actually coaching somebody going for a time goal for a marathon, and recently she didn't hit it, but she said afterwards she was more proud of this effort than anything that she's done because at one point she didn't think that she could finish, right? That she was just going to quit and she was able to find some sort of strength to push. So that's the whole thing about, confidence without expectations, dropping your expectations, setting a range of outcomes, controlling your effort and your attitude of, if A goal isn't in the cards, how do I hit B goal, or how do I just keep my mindset so open to the possibility that this could be the best race in the world, even if I didn't hit that goal. And I think we get so tied up in social media and I need to hit a standard and standards that other people are doing or setting for yourself, that we get lost and don't give ourselves the ability to do that in the moment, whatever that moment is for you.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something very important there, which is comparison. And we do
Mhm.
live in a world where you can see all of the other people who ran the marathon posting about their time. They hit their goal, they did this or that. And it can be really hard to navigate, because that is a real part of being human, is, I think, from a very natural standpoint, we compare ourselves to others. But at the end of the day, I think another metric that goes unmeasured or is underutilized is, did I become better from that, right? Did that process make me better? Did that pursuit make me better? And I believe it was Albert Einstein who said, not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that can be measured matters. And there's so many things in this world that we can measure, that we can post about, a metric, a time, etc. There are so many things that can't be measured or captured. Like, did I show up for myself? Did I keep my promises? Do I feel more confident? Did I build this skill or that skill? And those things inside of us that happen throughout a marathon prep, a race, another difficult pursuit, climbing the career ladder, whatever it is, like, did I get better? And if the answer is yes, then there is something to be so proud of just there, regardless of what happened with the outcome.
And Joe, you know what you can measure it to, though? Did I get better is to who you want to be, is
Mm.
what you said, right? To your vision, or can you, I think we should be doing that. Did I get better? Well, it's on my standard. And if my standard is yes, I did get better towards the person that I want to become, I'm winning. I'm doing exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, there's this great quote. I want to see if I can find it. And I might not be able to, which is a bummer, but I'll paraphrase. And it's basically about how the real work that happens is at the track early in the morning when nobody else is watching. It's said so eloquently, and it goes on, but that is the benchmark for me. It's like, okay, if nobody's watching and I show up and I say I'm going to do something hard to myself, and nobody would know if I stopped or I quit or I pulled back, can I push? Can I keep going? Can I do the hard thing for me in the dark on the track when everybody else is sleeping? And if I do those things, I know I'm getting better. And I think sometimes we look at, the big race or the event or the public arena, but I think a lot of those small private moments are just as important, but we don't share those with the world, and we don't get the external feedback of great job, keep going, that was awesome. And so I think it's important to realize that growth happens along the way, both in public and in private, and we should be pursuing that.
Couldn't agree more.
So, with that being said, before I move on to our next question, is there anything else you'd like to add about your running journey, things you've learned, things you've done, other challenging experiences or moments before I hit you with the next one?
So I had an original answer to this question, and I don't think I need to give you the full story, but I have completed a 100-mile race before, which was physically the hardest thing I've ever done, no questions asked. And it's funny that, back to the confidence without expectations mantra, I had somebody ask me, like, did you know, like, you were gonna finish? I was like, yeah, I know. I had no business, Joe, being confident that I could finish that race when the longest I had run was 50 miles, which is half of it, which is kind of like what the training plan suggests, and you don't have to go higher than that. But that's only what a training plan does. But the the ability to, yeah, again, just being able to be confident that I could do it helped me know that when I was sitting down in the middle of a path at mile 85, absolutely delusional at like 2 a.m., I still knew I was going to do it. And I could, because I knew I could hit it in a certain time range and be happy with whatever outcome I was accepting to do. So I think, yes, wanted to share that, and then just kind of tie it back to whatever you're doing, going for career goal, personal goal, big physical goal, just being able to be confident in your abilities to do it. That gets you to the starting line for here. And yeah, just love it.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear a little bit more about that ultra. There have been more than a handful of guests on this podcast who have described their ultra marathon experiences, and it's funny because I run in a circle of people, and so do you, where running an ultra marathon is cool. That's awesome. But it's not like, whoa, that's like nuts. I remember I was probably 10, and one of my mom's friends, who I definitely don't think listens to the podcast, but Stephanie, if you're listening, thank you. She ran marathons. And I remember overhearing that she was on a 20-mile training run, and I was 10 years old. And I was like, I couldn't fathom, right? That was how far it took to get from my house in New Jersey to my grandparents' house in New York. I was like, what in the world? People could run that far? And so when you're exposed to it over and over, and then you start doing it, you realize, okay, now 20 miles doesn't feel that crazy, right? That's could be a normal training run. But the 100-mile mark to someone who's not a runner sounds like, how is that even possible? So I would love to hear your experience of the 100 from a standpoint of, when did you know you wanted to do it? And then what was the hardest part of that race? Was it mile 85 in the middle of that path?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. First of all, I hope Stephanie's listening, or maybe now this gets her to listen. But isn't it funny to, when you hear 20-mile run to a runner, it's like, oh, good, what are you training for? But if you're not a runner, you're like, oh my gosh, why would you ever do that? And you get a whole, I don't even want to drive 20 miles. I don't even want to drive 100 miles, which I still get all the time, by the way. Um, so would you mind repeating your question?
Sure,
Sorry,
sure.
when that.
When did you know you wanted to run 100 miles slash like what sparked that desire? And then what was the hardest part of the race?
Great question. The wanting to do it came off of a failure. It came off of that failed sub 3 hour attempt. I was like, oh, well, can't do this, or this is going to take me forever to do because I tried to run a three and I ran a 3:57. Might as well see what I'm capable of and keep trying to go up the ladder and let's go for 100. I'm a very big proponent of surround yourself with others that make you better. Wholeheartedly believe that. So, as I was training for my 100-mile race, I actually got to join in on my two friends who were training for the Cocodona 250-mile race. So I always had every weekend, there were a 5 week stretch where 4 out of the 5 I ran a marathon on Saturday or more, and then I ran 10 to 15 miles after because you're supposed to train on tired legs for an ultra marathon. That's literally the point of it. So being able to surround myself with them was such a key. I don't know if I would have been able to do it. My mindset of like you said, getting up in the dark on the track, doing hard things. I didn't have that, but I wanted to be better. I knew I wanted to at that time. I wasn't at your level yet, but I surrounded myself with good people that pushed me to do it. So that's how I got to the starting line. And absolutely the hardest part of this was mile 85. Ran the first 40 miles. I was in like ninth place, and that was a bad idea. Um, so being able to go in through the night, I had trained through the night a bit. And at that point, I didn't know, I figured I would still be able to finish, but being able to sit down, like I had to sit down in the middle of the trail and be like, where am I? And then 5 more miles to an aid station, saw my wife at mile 90. And at that point, the sun was coming up. It was beautiful, Joe. This thing out of a book. I wish I was like vlogging or something like that. But being able to finish that was awesome.
Yeah. And I'll just share a quote that I love as it relates to hitting a wall and then pushing through. It's from William James, who said, most people never run far enough on their first wind to find out that they've got a second. And I think an ultra marathon and a marathon and a lot of running is a really beautiful way to experience that, where you get to a place where like, oh no, I'm tired. I don't know if I can keep pushing. I need to stop. But you make the decision to just keep going, one foot in front of the other. And mile 90, the sun comes up and all of a sudden you feel great, right? And that's the beauty of it. And that's also how life works. And I think running in a lot of ways is a perfect metaphor for life. And I'll read one more quote from Arthur Blank, who said, I run because it's so symbolic of life. You have to drive yourself to overcome the obstacles. You might feel that you can't, but then you find your inner strength and realize that you're capable of so much more than you thought. And it sounds like that aligns with what you're all about.
It sure does. Pretty much spot on.
Yeah. So, on the running side of things, another question I ask every guest, and this isn't always related to running, and it doesn't have to be in your case. Uh, this is the Project Endure podcast. And so, when you hear the word endure or endurance, what comes to mind for you?
It's we didn't actually talk about this prior. I mean, I know I had some of the questions and whatnot, but you just said a quote that kind of ties right into my answer. So when I hear the word endurance, I think about mindset
Hmm.
first and foremost. And it lines up with my personal mantra of capable of more. To me, endurance is the process of discovering just that. It's realizing you are capable of more than you think, and then doing the work to prove it to yourself.
Hmm.
So thank you for sharing that quote and tying it right in. So first, I honestly used to think of endurance first as just being able to get through something, which it can be, and it still is. But over the years, through marathon training, pacing my own goals, I've realized it's outlasting your own expectations as
Ooh.
well. And that's a powerful thing to be able to keep showing up and slowly make a new normal. I think it's incredible too when endurance kind of changes goals into habits almost. Specifically for running, my previous goals of training and running marathons is now just a habit. It's incredible. And like you can again apply that to other parts of your life, but it's how you stretch your limits. It's how you go from hoping you can do something to knowing that you can for endurance. Yeah, it's the
Wow.
best.
So I'll ask a follow up. If someone listening is sitting here thinking, okay, I want to go from hoping to knowing. I want to hope that I can do something, and then someday I want to know that I can do it. But I just don't have that belief in me right now. I don't have a great track record. I've tried things in the past, but I tend to give up on them. I just don't think I can do it. I just don't think that's for me. What would you say to them?
I would tell you to go absolutely shatter a few small goals.
Mm,
Go win big for yourself. And if you're on social or anything, shut it off. Do not care about what other people are doing. People that are just getting into running or whatever goal you might have. I tell people to go out without a watch. You go a minute back, 1 minute on, 1 minute off. You have to make it fun. Atomic Habits is a big book that I kind of live my life by, but it's like make it easy, make it satisfying, make it rewarding. So if you don't think you can do it, go make something so fun, so easy, and so rewarding and satisfying to you that you just want more of it.
yeah. I think that making it fun, finding the reward, uh, turning off the thing that leads us to comparison, and starting small are great pieces of advice and guidance there. And I just want to go back to your definition of endurance, because there were almost two parts there. And so the first part, if actually, would you mind just reading it again, and then I'll break it down?
Please, yeah. So to me, endurance is the process of discovering the capable of more, that you're realizing you're capable of more than you think, and then doing the work to prove it to yourself.
So it's that discovering and realizing you're capable of more, and then doing the
Mm.
work to prove it to yourself. And I think that piece is the piece that a lot of people miss, because you do have to have proof that you can do it. And the way you get proof is by going out and doing the thing. It's about working hard, it's about showing up. And that's not always comfortable. And I think when people watch or someone cross a finish line, or they're holding up a medal on an Instagram post, or they think of, oh, I want to be the kind of person that does those things, it almost gives the illusion that it should feel good, right? Because like those moments in theory feel good, but to get there does not always feel good. I would say often it actually does not feel good. It's the training run that kind of sucked. It's the pain in your legs, the burn in your lungs. It's running a 357 when you wanted to run a 3. It's the setbacks and challenges. It's the days where you don't believe all that much, but you choose to keep showing up. And I think like that moment of beauty that a lot of us want is preceded by a lot of pain and disappointment and challenge and struggle. And that doesn't always feel good. And so if someone is listening and they're like, I'm trying to give myself proof, I'm trying to show up, I'm trying to do the thing, it just doesn't feel great. Okay, well, it's not supposed to feel great all the time. So that might mean you're on the right path. Keep going.
That's right. And one thing I use in running, which is again applicable to life, is the rule of thirds. For me, at least, a third of the runs suck, a third of them feel okay, and a third of them are awesome. And I think that's like weightlifting sessions. That's just going into work every day. I mean, you're not feeling 100%, 100% of the time. And you have to accept that. And I think for some reason in like physical challenges, that is so that crushes you more than like even just using the work example. Like there's 5 days a week. I doubt you're feeling your best Monday through Friday. You're probably feeling your best on Tuesday morning and Wednesday afternoon. And but take that same, mindset and thought into whatever you're doing for training and running. Like I talk to so many people like, man, I could barely, I'm running 2 minutes slower than my pace yesterday and it sucks. And like my training's going on. What happened? Well, that's life. I mean, there's stress, there's family stuff, there's nutrition, there's things that you can't control, and you just have to accept it and giving yourself grace in both aspects, I think is very critical.
I love that. And it makes me think of episode 26 of this podcast with Richard Pogue. Richard is I'll just talk for a second about Richard. I love Richard. Richard is one of the only people who's been to all 4 of the annual Project Endure events. He's got a big beard. He's got tons of muscles. He looks almost a bit intimidating, but he is the nicest, softest person on the inside that you'll ever meet. And he runs an after school program for kids where he teaches them about grit. And one of the things he said in that conversation on the podcast was that he'll ask the kids when they come in, what number are you today? Or maybe 1 to 10, not 0 to 10, 1 to 10. And, some kid might have had like an awesome day at school. They're hopped up on sugar. They feel great. And they say, I'm a 9 out of 10. And he'll say, great, give me all of that 9 today. And then another kid might have not slept well, had a rough, has a rough home life, just tough day at school. And they say, I'm a 2. And I'll say, that's okay. Just give me all of that 2. And I think it comes down to, right, the rule of thirds, right? Sometimes you're going to feel like between a 1 and a 3. That's a third of the time. And then between a 4 and a 6, and that's another third. And then, well, this math doesn't add up, but between a 7 and a 10, right? A third of the time. And you just have to own it, right? And if you're in one of those bottom third days, just give all of that bottom third that you can give and understand that those days happen. And I think acceptance, surrender, however you want to phrase that, is a big part of it. And so I appreciate you sharing that.
Excited to go listen to episode 26, and your memory is impeccable.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But with that being said, so this is the last question, but also my favorite question of the podcast, because there are people all over the world listening to this. Some of them are runners, some of them are not. But the things we've talked about today are applicable to everyone, everywhere. There are people who are just going through a bottom third season of their life. It might not just be a day, it might be a month or a year or a lot of years, and they're just struggling and they're not sure where to go or what to do. For those people in that season, what would you say to them?
I love this question, and it's your way to inspire the world to be better. So thank you for asking this. I think what I'd say is, if anyone's listening and has something on their mind, or you're in that season, maybe you could follow along with me. I'm a running coach, so I wouldn't tell you what to do, but I would try to coach you in a way. But first, I would say, I would ask you, what is your ideal state? Visualize your ideal state. Then I'd say, what steps are in your control to get there? And write those down and reflect. Then I'd ask, of those that you can control, what prevents you from taking those steps? Is it fear of failure? Is it something that's off? Because that's one of mine. So that's why I'm sharing that. If applicable, can you use confidence without expectations? Can you build confidence on what you can control and what's preventing you? And then I'd say, how will you know you've made it? How will you know you've made it out? And that is a self-determined bar. It's a measurement. Measurement and accountability are key. It doesn't have to be comparison to anyone, but you have to set that, what does good look like for me to get out of this season, and how do I sustain it? So that's what I would ask.
Man, that is so good. I love that there's a bit of a step-by-step framework that someone could go back, listen to a few times, write down their thoughts in response, and then go take action on that. So I appreciate it, Jimmy. I appreciate your preparation. I appreciate your energy. I just appreciate you and what you're doing. And, before we wrap up, I would love to give you a chance to, tell people where they can follow along if they want to reach out and say thank you, if they want to just see more of what you do and what you're about. Where's the best place for people to do that?
Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been incredible. I lead a run club based out of Phoenixville called the Renegades. We have many group runs along the week, but I lead the Tuesday night run club at 6:30 out of Rec Room in Phoenixville. If you ever want to come, we actually just had a record 60 runners on a Tuesday night, which to me is mind blowing. So if you ever want to check it out, we're an all paces, all faces run club. And then if you want to ever connect with me personally on Instagram, I'm at Jim Shady 24, play on of Slim Shady from Eminem. Never changed it from back in the day, but it's a lot of fun. I post every day, try to inspire the running community.
Well, Jimmy, I will link link your Instagram in the description so people can connect, and just want to thank you again for this. And I'm really looking forward to the day where you and I get to go on a run together and meet in person. You'll have to slow it down for me a little bit, but I'll do my best to keep up.
Can't wait, Joe. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Endure podcast, Go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.